taste. Busting makes me feel good.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Blockbusting, the podcast where we love to hate movies. I'm your host, Jay Light. Joining me today, I got a twofer for you. I got the wonderful hosts of the Shut Up, I Love It podcast, Joe and Sasha. Hello.
Hello, shut up.
I love it. Hi. That was pretty good, actually.
Yeah, that worked almost as if rehearsed.
Everything is going to be that way. No, it won't.
Did y'all have a pre-Zoom before this to practice that? Because that was real. That was nice. That was seamless. Good work.
We've had about 60 in the Shut Up, I Love It podcast.
In the Shut Up, yeah, of course, yeah. By the way, fun podcast. I just released my episode that I did for y'all as a feed drop on my feed. So if you haven't listened to it, listeners, listen to it and then listen to some of their other episodes because they don't just talk about movies.
Yeah, everything.
All kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and we love things. We don't hate them like in this show.
Exactly.
Actually, there have been 2 hate episodes, but they're very special episodes. And now we really get to flex our hate muscle.
Yeah.
Let's see if we do well.
I feel like if you're talking about stuff that is loved all the time on your podcast, you must have a lot of pent-up hate. And this is a great film to take it out on. It is Pixar's Onward, a 2020 computer-animated urban fantasy adventure film.
You know, the common genre that we're all familiar with.
Urban fantasy, you already have a huge problem. Urban fantasy is for people who want to be creative, but their creative ceiling is about 3 inches off the floor.
And we're not talking about women's glass ceiling.
No. Or their what is it called? The ovarian ceiling? What is it?
I
Is there a
should
ceiling?
know the answer to
Is
it.
it the cervix?
Their
I feel like that's the ovarian
ceiling.
floor.
Their cervix ceiling. If there's a floor, there's a ceiling. In my book.
Sasha, this is just exactly what you expected coming on this film criticism podcast is 2 guys talking about female anatomy, I'm sure. Perfect.
And I'll probably learn a lot because I'm barely familiar with it.
Well, think about it. There's more men gynecologists than female gynecologists.
I
So
never thought about it. Is that a real thing?
I think about it every night. It's what I pray to before I go to sleep.
I feel like I would roll a gynecologist in a D&D game that was set in an urban fantasy. Look at that transition right back
Pretty great.
And let me derail it. I won't yet.
Yeah, this is some film that I, in classic like late Pixar style, had no real desire to see, and I watched it exclusively for this podcast, and it's it was a movie. It had some moments, and some of them were good and some of them were bad, and that's what I think as a broad baseline. What about y'all? What was your experience like the first time you watched this movie? Why did you hate it? Why does it stick with you?
Take it away, Sash.
I don't have a great story about my first watching experience because what I did is I stopped it pretty quickly. What I do, I walk out of movies / I stop them. I walk out electronically, and this was one of those experiences the first time I quote unquote saw it.
Oh wow, how long?
Once the legs showed up with no body.
Okay. Yeah, that's not that far. That's maybe 15.
15 max.
Ish.
Yeah.
Catalyst sort of territory
it's somewhere in the
or
inciting
something.
incident-ish, almost.
Very inciting incident-ish. Yeah. A story, B story. B story is terrible. We'll talk about it. Yeah. Once it became creepy, not in a fun way, I said, there's other things to do in my coronavirus world. And
Fair.
I moved on.
Joe, what about you?
I actually saw it for my movie review podcast. So I saw it with some intention to think about it. I would argue intention to enjoy it, which I do try to go into every movie enjoying it and fail a lot. But so it was probably after the opening sequence, I think there's a single shot after the opening sequence that I was done with the movie. And of course, like, I'm not saying I didn't prematurely ejaculate. I didn't, I wasn't just, I gave it a chance after that, but that was the big, like, whiff of shit. That was the cat turd in the litter box where you're like, wait.
And you weren't sure how much more turd there was to go, and you were like, I'm going to dig around a little bit more in here, see if I really need to change all this litter or just throw the whole litter box out. And
I had to. It was more like, because I had to watch it for this podcast, I had to sit with the litter until, like, my fiance came back with fresh litter, because we were all out of litter. It was that type of cat. If we're keeping up the cat litter analogy, that's it.
Was it organic or one of those, like, flavored
like
litters?
Clay. It was like heavily flavored clay where it just turns into ooze.
It's never good.
You know.
Oh yeah, the pearls.
It never works. It can't possibly work.
No,
you got to
it doesn't
stick with the
work.
old formula. Just putting it out there.
Grass.
Yeah, I think I use a cat litter that's just called. It's almost called litter, I think, and it's effective. Classic. No frills, just clumps, no smells. Get it out of there. Except this movie would have definitely stunk up that litter box.
It will. And it's not a completely terrible movie. Like, I do understand that someone would enjoy this. I do think they might have the brain the size of a shark's. Yeah, just like very walnutish or peanutish brain to enjoy this movie. But it's not completely terrible, you know? But that's what's so bad about it.
Yeah. That's the thing with Pixar movies, and now that I've watched a few of the ones that are just sort of, you know, they're movies and they don't really ascribe to be anything better than that. Pixar is kind of like pizza, right? Where it's like, hey, even if it's bad, it's still like it's Pixar.
Supposed to be. It was like that for a while, and then it stopped.
I think this is the closest to that. It's closer than any of the Cars franchise to that. And that's almost, it almost is not the case for me. That's the way I felt. I think that if Tom Holland was not in this movie, then it would have been so much closer to good than it actually wound up being.
I have a huge issue with Tom Holland, not as in this movie. I don't have an issue with Tom Holland as an actor, but I think it's so stupid to hire a British actor in an animated film to do an American accent. Like, how far away from this human being are we trying to get? And I also, too, don't like the hiring actors for voice actors. I wasn't like, oh my God, the reason why I love Tom Holland and seeing him on screen is because of his American accent voice.
Right.
No, we watch him because he looks cute. He's a good actor as an actor, not a voice actor.
He's
no
face
Josh
actor.
Gad. Yeah, he's a face actor.
He's a face actor for sure.
A sit on my
Classic.
face actor.
And he does. Even JLD, it was total waste of hers, it felt like.
Yeah. I didn't realize that was... I completely, in my head, miscast this movie. Besides Tom Holland and Chris Pratt, I couldn't place who the mom was, and JLD was definitely miscast. I couldn't place who the Manticore was, Octavia Spencer. I thought the standard John Ratzenberger voice was Colt Bronco, the police officer. Not him. Got it all wrong, because nobody did their voices right in this movie except for Chris Pratt, who, hey, he just was Chris Pratt as an elf, and that's really all he needed to be.
Well, and say what you will about him. I know he's now cast as Mario and Garfield even, and people are a bit...
Is Garfield too?
I believe so. Fact check that, Snopes. But, he's earned his voice actor credit, in my opinion. The Lego movies, he's very good in that. I think he does have the voice actor mentality for whether or not you like him.
I don't think he started out as a face actor. He became one. He started out as a guy whose voice was better than his face.
Yeah, he was a comic actor, really, and played big characters. Even when he wasn't a comic actor in his younger days, they were very big, almost cartoonish characters. Even Everwood, he was a little cartoonish.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's good. But yeah, these other actors, like Julie Louis-Dreyfus, Octavia Spencer, it's like, what is this even for? Were you even trying to challenge yourself?
And the problem starts with writing. It's just shitty writing for this B story. I'm going to keep talking about this B story because there's different issues
You
that I
hate it.
have.
There's so many issues with
There's
the
so
whole,
many issues.
Yeah. But
Like-
and go ahead.
I'm gonna take it for a second.
Take it.
From here. Yeah, like the biggest problem with the A story is that they have what looks like an alcoholic dad stuck with them.
Yeah.
Who is like ready to pretty much die, and they have to like save him. That's what it like translates to me, at least, is that it's an alcoholic dad and he's constantly on the verge of dying, and these two kids have to step up and like rescue him, and it looks so creepy and not fun, not in a fun way. Because
no, not the fun alcoholic dad way.
no, not the fun alcoholic dad, not the nice one who's buying you gifts and like he just has
Right.
kind of a funny gait, but he's great otherwise. No.
This is the dad who should go to AA for sure.
Oh God, I hope so. And also he's missing torso and everything up from there. So all we see is his little package wrapped in skinny jeans. And every time like he has to be directed by the kids, they have to like gently touch his butt, which is every time disturbing to me. A lot of times like his package is dead center in the shot.
Yeah,
and I'm
he
like,
has a
why am I
leash.
looking at it?
You could just grab that leash of his and drag him around.
He's got his leash. He's got his
If you
dad
know what I
fupa.
mean.
He's all ready to roll.
Yeah, there's a bit of a fupa. It's really interesting, like how they decided that that's what kids want to see. And then the B story about mom who's very like kind of annoying, kind of Karen-y, may I say? And then like the the Octavia Spencer's character. What's the name of that?
The
You know,
Manticore.
the magical
Corey.
beast where all should be super into. Yeah, like their story doesn't lead anywhere. Nobody cares.
And two
No
things about
stakes.
that. She should have the most stakes because it's her husband. She's so like outside of this situation with
Yeah.
the dad coming back. Yet it's like, that's your husband. They're like, oh, fuck it. We're going to take him and, you know, go around the city with this guy. So it just makes it feel like a different movie, or like she's the aunt or something, not the
She's very
mother.
very auntie.
I also, I'm not, you know, there's a history of using black actors as like the monster character and then white actors as the non-monster character, which of course everybody here is some sort of creature, but there is like still racial coding with like, oh, the like normal blue elves, and then the black actress is the manticore.
Right.
There's something that doesn't so bother me, but it's there, and it feels like it's just the same tropes, negative tropes that exist
Yeah.
in casting.
And that's the thing too. It's like, I mean, even if you're looking at all the cops too, you know, Cole Bronco is voiced by a Cuban guy. Lena Waithe voices one of the police officers. Ali Wong voices one of the police officers. So all the white people in this movie get the good guy parts. All the POC characters in this movie, or the POC actors in this movie, are playing the closest thing we have to an antagonist, which also, another big problem with this movie, pretty
There
much
isn't
no
one.
antagonist, no villain.
No.
And I hate that. I love a good antagonist. I think every story should have one, especially a kid's story. And there's nothing here. They're fighting nothing except their alcoholic dad and their attachment to him.
Yeah.
It's a lot of things going on top of each other that could be their own movies. Like you have the Weekend at Bernie's style story of
Yeah.
here's just legs and a body. Then you have fantasy, and then you have like urban fantasy comedy mapping with that too. And it doesn't do any one of those particularly well. Like the gags for the dad aren't really that funny. I will give it credit for the foot tapping thing. I thought was a really sweet, like visual thing that connects the kids in them. But other than that, there's no real like good gag with the bottomless stuff. And
Well,
as far as
sidebar, that's the only time that he's conscious of what's happening around him when he's tapping the foot. After that, he has no idea where he's at. And
what does
what's
he think's happening?
Like,
Yeah. There's a definite miracle worker undercurrent that is throughout the entire movie where they're just trying to help their topless dad figure out how to exist. The answer when they have him dancing and they're like, oh, he must feel the vibrations in the car, but then he gets out of the car and can't feel the vibrations anymore. Doesn't make any sense. It's just a setup for a cheap, hey, we're going to feel good about ourselves dance sequence.
Yeah, let's put a Bruno Mars song in this. I know it wasn't that, but it feels like just one of those moments where they couldn't clear Bruno Mars. So they were just like, okay, we'll keep this really lame scene.
Close enough
here.
to Bruno Mars.
Yeah,
It's Bruno
sad.
with an umlaut over the U and the O. That's the fantasy Bruno Mars.
It's the poor man's Bruno Mars. Oh,
Yeah.
poor woman's.
We haven't even really like delved into the plots of this movie besides the B story. The overarching and all the plot that's going on we've established is just like the baseline, hey, this is how you get from point A to point B. The sort of emotional core of the movie is Chris Pratt and Tom Holland's relationship to each other, because it's a road movie about them trying to go finish resurrecting their topless dad, and they run into all these foibles. There's all this D&D laced stuff that gets thrown into the movie because at the very beginning we have this opening sequence where they're set up, hey, magic exists, but then it stopped existing because people stopped caring about it. And then we get to hear the voice explain all of that all again later on, about maybe 5 minutes after that opening sequence. Find out Tom Holland's magical, Chris Pratt's not, but he plays the world's version of D&D, and off they are, bickering and figuring out how to go on this quest. And it just doesn't feel like it has any of the care and effort that you would put even into a lower tier animated movie.
It's because it thinks it's clever. So I really ribbed on urban fantasy. Mm-hmm. And it's because, so you have this great sequence that starts it where it shows when magic was used. And it's a really energetic and fun sequence of the past. And then of course, you realize, like you said, magic people, it was easier to do technology. It fell out of fashion. Mm-hmm. And then you cut to a shot straight out of the movie Bright, written by Max Landis from
Shout
Netflix.
Shout out
to the monster Max Landis, trying to one-up his father. But it's, so you have these unicorns or whatever they are, Pegasus unicorns, I forget, rifling through trash. That same joke was used not with unicorns, but with, I think, fairies or something in Bright. Yeah. Because this is just a singular joke. This whole movie is just the singular joke of like, oh, what would fantasy stuff be like in the real world? Mm-hmm. And this is something an improv level 1 student would come up with.
There was definitely no second draft and when they were spitballing the fun and games part of this story.
Not
they
at
were
all.
Like, we'll take the first draft. That's good enough.
Whatever gags you can think of, even though they're in Bright, this whole thing. And I don't even like Bright, first off.
Oh, Bright's awful. And this is not as bad as Bright, but Bright at least had a little bit more, I don't even want to say a little bit more inventiveness, but I think it did a better job with the premise of, hey, we're going to have fantasy happening in an urban environment than this did.
Well, you do that premise when you're shooting live action. Mm-hmm. Because, putting a guy in makeup is hard, but it's not as hard as like going on location to shoot at these amazing fantasy locations or making those environments 3D. Right. You could just shoot on the street and be like, oh, dude, that guy's got orc makeup on and he's on the LA streets. This is fantasy.
Right.
So I don't understand why for an animated movie where the world is your oyster, you have the full colors of the coloring book.
Except it's only purple. That's what the movie looks like.
Also,
incredibly purple movie. I actually took a screenshot and put it in Photoshop with the color dropper, and it only produced purple.
As purple as it gets.
So I just think it's flawed. The concept is flawed. It's something that sounds good immediately. Have you ever been at a party? We're all creative people. Sasha's a screenwriting teacher. For God's sakes. You ever been at a party and you riff with a bunch of people and then the riff is fun and everyone's like, oh, that would make a good movie. And you're thinking, no, it wouldn't. Or like this would take a year to make into a good movie. Like if we sat down right now, we would immediately be stumped by how this probably doesn't have a lot of meat on the bones for a movie. And that's what this feels like. It's just like, oh, what if, fantasy died, magic died, and they, it's just like, okay, but for what? Because
what if it wasn't fun at all? Like, what if we just took the fun premise and we're like, the premise of this movie that it's not going to be fun, even though you think it will be fun.
Yeah. How about we take something that sounds cool and make it dumb? And
just
boring
base.
And a slog to watch.
Yeah, it's not a fun movie. I don't get how you could have a fantasy movie that's just not fun.
Or a road trip like movie. They tend to be usually fun in some way. There's like definitely a development relationship. I would say that Brown Bunny by Vincent Gallo is a better road trip movie.
But not for kids. Kids should
not
not watch
for kids. Kids
Brown
do
Bunny.
not watch. Parents do not let your kids watch Brown Bunny.
Well, you want them to watch this with the alcoholic dad who's nothing but genitals?
That's the thing. Yeah, I would be very hurt if I saw this film at a young, impressionable age.
Irreparable damage.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like this is the kind of movie that a parent who neglects their child would make them watch and not take the time to research, like, what's an actual good kids movie that I can throw my kids on the couch and have them watch. And instead, they're just going to put this on because it's on Disney Plus.
Because it's Pixar.
And it's Pixar. And you're like, yeah, sure, Pixar's good. And then you have a movie full of hack ideas and Tom Holland doing a worse job putting emotion into lines than Siri reading your emails back to you.
Yeah.
And his face is probably doing great work. Like, when they show those scenes, like behind the scenes of people recording their VO dialogue. I bet if you watch that, you'd be like, wow, this is really good. But then you see it on an animated character and it's not.
It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit.
It just doesn't fit. I almost wonder, like, because there's somebody directing the VO session to some degree, whether it's live or whether they listen to the tape back and give notes later. How could anyone listen to Tom Holland's line reads? That's the first note I wrote down watching this movie was, how did anyone approve Tom Holland talking the way no person ever has talked in the history of the world?
Because he doesn't even talk like that. And I think that's the problem with it is you have this guy, it's not his voice. He's not a voice actor. What were you going to get? I don't think they could note him, right? Because I think he's actually doing a great job for him. Mm-hmm. I think he's doing the best he can, and there's nothing more you could get out of him without doing like a year of boot camp of animation voiceover.
Yeah.
And that's the problem when you have actors doing this stuff. You're probably watching them in the booth and you're like, oh, this is great. But then they don't know what you actually need to do to be a great VO actor like I do. Mm-hmm. This is all about me, thinking that I'm better. And
you should have done a fan recut of Onward. Like, who's the guy who did the fan recut of Star Wars?
It was the guy from That 70s Show. Topher Grace, I believe, did it.
Topher Grace, that is who it is.
And it's supposed to be good, so good on Topher. He's a legend. But I'm so passionate about this movie being bad because we're on this podcast. No, but I am also that passionate about it because it's not considered a bad movie. It's well liked by a lot of people. People love it.
Extremely well liked. Mm-hmm. I did not realize until I pulled up the Wikipedia page for this movie. It has an 88% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's insane. Like, that's huge.
It is, and this is the craziest thing too, is the reviews that have been cherry picked for the Wikipedia page are not good reviews. They're saying stuff. Even the Rotten Tomatoes log line for their entirety of their reviews is, it may suffer in comparison to Pixar's classics. That's the first line.
We suffer.
Everybody involved suffers. That's why my first instinct was right to turn it off.
You made the right call. So.
You
Yeah.
were.
Peter Bradshaw called it a likable family comedy that finds an
Likeable.
easy rhythm without effort. Peter Travers said that it's no Toy Story, but it's worth your while.
That's a meaningless quote. And also, what is that first one? Without effort.
Likeable.
It finds
Without effort.
it finds
the entire
whatever
movie.
without effort. Like, what does that even mean?
It
Like,
means you're not paying attention and you're just fine. Like, it means it's not worth paying attention to. I think there's like a message behind
Yeah,
this.
there's
it's like
something
playing
under
the
that,
Beatles
right?
backwards. You realize what the truth is. You know?
play this
and,
movie backwards.
and by the way, calling something likable is not a compliment. I strongly believe to call somebody likable is like there's something else going on.
Yeah, it's like but. There's a big but with likable that people don't say. But it definitely means like, oh, there's not a whole being there. They're just likable.
And you
No.
know which butt it is in this movie? The dad's butt.
The dad's butt. The entire time it's the dad's butt. Here's something else about this movie. And it's crazy to me that people think this movie's great. And it's even crazier to me that people got really mad at this movie too in other countries. It's been banned in Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia because one of the police officers, the one voiced by Lena Waithe, has a throwaway line that indicates she's a lesbian. She says, "It's not easy being a new parent. My girlfriend's daughter got me pulling my hair out, okay?" Mm-hmm. And those countries banned it. Even though homosexual acts are criminalized in those countries, except for Kuwait, which does not criminalize female homosexual acts. Very cool of Kuwait. Good job.
But that's what I'm talking about.
That's what I'm talking about.
If you're gonna be homophobic,
Also, Bahrain, the UAE, Lebanon, and Egypt changed the line. They didn't ban it, but they changed the line to my sister's daughter instead of my girlfriend's daughter.
Same thing.
Yeah.
It's not.
It still doesn't track. And then in Russia, because
Tell
there's a gay propaganda law that I don't fully understand, and I'm not going to read a whole Wikipedia page about that because this Zoom meeting's time is not going to take enough. So it criminalizes the dissemination of LGBT related content. So the Russian dub just said, "My partner's daughter got me pulling my hair out."
Okay.
even more woke.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I mean, no, I'm not okay with Russia's propaganda laws, gay propaganda laws.
Well, it's
terrible.
funny that it's homophobia circled back to wokeness because I know many friends who will not say girlfriend or boyfriend; they'll say partner.
Oh yeah, I've heard a
because-
lot of people saying partner these days.
So it's just so funny that they've actually made something more woke. And certainly, I'm sure we all hate the reasons for that banning and changing. But there is something to be said about this. Not so much the casual inclusion of gays in family films, where it's usually it's a secondary or tertiary character that it just mentions that they might be gay.
Right.
That's, I think, that's a cool thing because we really want normalcy. We want to see that this is normal, not only with our main characters, but just in the world. But the big issue with that is more with the patting on their back of Disney and other studios, which part of that's a problem with the movie media as well that loves to make a big thing of it. And thus it seems like the Disney itself is making a big thing of it. But I just hate the patting of its back of like, hey, a deleted scene character mentions that they might be gay. Aren't we good? Didn't we do it?
If there's
like,
one
no.
thing Disney loves to do, it's go, we finally got a gay character in the movie. And they do that like 6 or 7 times until they finally have an actual.
Yeah. It's so sad every time it happens and nobody likes it.
No. There's so much of this movie beyond any of the censorship stuff, which is really just a sidebar that I think is interesting and does not do anything as it so often does with Disney movies, but just create more hype and try and get more people to watch it. I feel like this movie needed more hype and needed more people to watch it because the premise of it is so paper thin and so lame. I mean, it seems like, I know that D&D and this sort of fantasy realm has become much more in the public eye thanks to things like Critical Role and the Adventure Zone. And it just seems
two things I would argue most people have never heard of.
But still,
but yes, you are right, and you're getting into something that makes me dislike this movie. Is that it's that exact thing that I think it's more of a Game of Thrones that has ushered the populace introduction of fantasy, and now more people playing D&D. And this seems like it's not coming from the idea of like, hey, what's a really awesome idea? Where like Toy Story, amazing concept. Mm-hmm. That's the only one I can think of. Cars.
Up. No. I love Up.
Up. Wall-E.
Up. Yeah, Wall-E. Inside Out. I know Sasha hates Inside Out.
Don't.
But I think it's such a juicy concept still, whether or not Sasha likes it. But this just feels like it was chasing something cool that was going on. Yeah. And then they probably were like, oh, we can't do a straight fantasy. We have to do this urban fantasy because like, oh, if we do, that's too much. That's just brave.
But also why? Like, does diluting this mythological world, does diluting it actually make me relate more to these characters because I recognize myself in them? No, that's not how storytelling works at all. Just because they also go to school and like there's school buses and just like boring stuff happening. And the most like one of the biggest set pieces in the whole movie is just regular fire. Like instead of something magical, it's just like a building on fire. Like that doesn't make me be more connected to the material at all.
Yeah. It's in like the best part of this movie is the end, or like I'd say what happens in the last 30 minutes with the emotional connection between the two brothers, with realizing that the brother was the father to the youngest person, and he actually should talk to his dad, not the brother who didn't have any connection with them. That all really works on its own. And that would have worked even better if it was just a straight fantasy. It still could have been there. There's no difference to the story. You could still have that. Yeah. Hey, your dad died in a magician war or whatever, or even being sick, and your magic conjured him back, and then you're actually in a fantasy world. But instead, it is like, oh, instead of they have to escape a burning dungeon, it's a restaurant. It's like, that's funny as a tweet. Mm-hmm. It's not funny as a scene in a movie.
It's not using the medium to its full extent.
And that's I think that's the thing that this movie really whiffs at, is just allowing cleverness to drive it. And thinking about like at the Pixar offices where so much great creative work has happened over the years. Just to think that there's one of those rooms with a whiteboard or a corkboard or something, however they generate the ideas over there, that are like, what are all the wacky fantasy fast food restaurants we can do?
Yeah, and that's what they came up with.
Instead of trying to do something that, I don't know, had a more emotional stakes than just like one moment seen at a distance.
Which is a great moment.
Yeah.
But
there are like two moments in this film.
It's not worth a whole movie to watch.
No. This is, you know how everybody says like the first 10 minutes of Up is one of the greatest short films of all time?
I cried right away. Yeah.
It's so great. This movie, if you compress the entire rest of the movie down into just having that moment at the very end where we're seeing the dad convo from a distance, that's great. And that hits the emotional marks, but I want this movie to be 10 minutes tops. I want this to be a short before a greater Pixar movie.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing that it could be, because you'd get the just quick jokes of the Manicores is a fast food restaurant. Cool. It's nothing more interesting than that quick joke all the other situations like that, and then the emotional punch, I'd be singing its praises.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this whole sequence of the younger brother realizing that he had a dad because he had a father's figure in his older brother, leading to like their hug. That is the 10 first minutes of Up. That's the version of that, you know? And then they didn't, like they had that worked out, the Pixar people, and then they didn't worry about keeping everything else entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it's like they knew that it was going to end at that moment. So you're like, okay, we have that moment. This is strong. I've written poor scripts that way where I'm like, okay, this end moment was really good. And it made me think the rest of the shit that I wrote was good because it ended up getting to that moment.
Yeah.
Third acts are hard. They're hard. So figuring that out is great, but still you have to get them like probably earlier than that.
If your third act is good, I bet you your first and second aren't.
Yeah.
You could quote me on that.
Somebody should have told the screenwriters of this that is what happened. Here's the real, like, you know, at the end of the day, at the end of the pod, we've talked about some issues that sort of plague this movie. We've talked better versions of genre for this movie, both on
Brown
fantasy
Bunny.
and on the road movie side. Yes. Is there anything else, if we're looking at the movie as it is, you know, it's pretty lean as far as time goes. It really doesn't feel too terribly overlong in terms of an actual movie standpoint, but it just doesn't feel right from a perspective of if you all had the chance to rewrite this movie, how do you fix it?
Sasha?
I already answered this question, I guess, by saying I would cut it to 10 minutes of two brothers realizing that they are enough to each other.
We just keep the Pixar short length.
Yeah, there's no solution for this because the premise is in itself rotten.
Fair.
Joe?
If I didn't go so extreme as that, I would say keep it all in a 100% fantasy world where this whole they forgot about magic thing never happened. That part is pretty inconsequential to what is the most impactful message of the movie. Like, the most impactful message is the brother-father.
Yeah.
If you're a brother-father or not.
Like
Do you think the
Chinatown.
brother
You,
had
my
sex
sister,
with
and my
his mom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that?
But it's, I don't know what that adds, right? There's, I guess, this little thing of Barley, the older brother, being a believer while others aren't. But that, I don't know if that really connects with anybody. Like, you could go missing and no one would care, I think, versus the brother-father thing couldn't go missing.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, it so handcuffed itself. It cuckolded itself, really.
Yeah.
With its premise. So I would keep more or less the same story, maybe not have a bottomless father, but do something different with that, but have it just be in a fantasy world. They're on a real quest.
Fair.
Not on the highway.
Not on a highway.
Life
Not on
is
the
a highway.
expressway.
Some people in Disney movies have said life is a highway. I'm going to
Yeah.
ride it all night long.
Yeah.
And there's a Chloe Sevigny somewhere at the end of it.
At the end of all of us.
I look, I'm gonna stick with y'all on this one. There's a lot of different versions of this movie that could have existed, and unfortunately, they gave us this unmagical heap. And guess what? If you went to a drive-in theater to go see this movie, you wasted your time. You should have listened to Richard Roper of the Chicago Sun-Times, who I never quote because Richard Roper never has good reviews. But he says it perfect. The story fluctuates between the uninspired and the just plain weird.
Yeah.
Wow.
The movie begins
Nailed
with an
it.
intriguing premise, but doesn't come close to fully fleshing out the possibilities.
No fleshing. Zero fleshing.
Facts.
Zero flesh, just bones, just a skeleton.
Yeah. I would say if you went to the drive-in to see this movie, you should have crashed on your way there.
Oh, that's
You
harsh.
would have had a better time.
And called your older brother and connected with him.
Yeah.
Your
I
father,
hope-
brother.
your father, brother, your brother, father. And that would have been a much more emotional time for everybody than Onward. Y'all, this was I can't believe I was talking to Sasha on our little Zoom break there. I can't believe to do movie podcast episodes where I come away liking the movie even less, but this is how it happened. This movie has dropped at least half a star, if not a full star, by the time this pops up and this episode's out. So thank you for continuing to demystify.
Yeah. And I just quickly want to add that the worst thing about this movie that we haven't mentioned is its title. No child would want to watch a movie called Onward.
Oh, yeah.
How about call it My Dad's Legs or something else that's a little more intriguing.
The Daddy Bottom.
Yeah.
And the posters suck. So the posters says Onward, as we've just addressed, horrible title, and just has two blue guys sitting on a van. It's like, okay, great. I mean, I guess it was warning us, right? This movie had been warning us the whole time. This is not going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
I think what happened, because the joke in the movie is that Onward is what Barley has changed his, in his car, in his van, the drive function to be. And I think they wanted to call this movie Drive, and then they're like, oh, there's that Ryan Gosling movie instead.
And then someone said, call it N-word. How about Onward, actually?
Or do you think actually Onward, if you move some letters around, actually means saying warned? You've been warned. I don't know if that's the case, but it's close enough, okay?
Oh, like an anagram or whatever.
Yeah, like anagram, like do not watch this film.
They should have called this movie Downward, because that's my perception of Pixar after watching it. Hold on, I have an alt to that joke. You know, they should have just called this movie No.
Kids more likely to watch this movie if it's called No than Onward. No kid would ever be excited about that. Onward, I want to see it, Mom. No, never happened.
Yeah.
No one said that.
Toy Story, that's a hell of a name.
Yeah. Toy Story, great name. Up? Sure. You got a poster with House of Balloons?
Into it.
Very into it.
Yeah, it
Onward?
makes sense.
No thanks. This is the very fun time. Much more fun than the actual movie Onward was. So I hope y'all.
Yeah, actually, I do have a problem. I got a bone to pick with you.
What's the bone?
The bone is that I was very excited to be on this podcast, but then I realized to be a good guest, I had to actually watch this movie again to not just go off of some memory. And I guess in some ways, thank you for about 20 minutes in, I was like, oh no, I was right.
Yeah.
I was right.
Oh, I was right about stopping the film the first time.
Yeah.
You should have stopped it a second time at 10 minutes in.
So, sorry to make me watch this movie again, but at least I was validated.
We're all happen.
we were all in this together. Okay, we all made it out alive.
True.
Somehow. Where in the world, if people somehow are in the 88% who love this movie, where can they go on social media and say, Joe, Sasha, y'all made the wrong call on this? Where can they find you guys?
Well, I personally am at Joe Cabello. You could also reach out to us at Shut Up I Love It 1, but we probably don't check that on Twitter a lot.
Once every few weeks, we do.
Yeah, we post on there weekly with the episodes, but don't really think about.
But we
who's
might
tweeting at us.
start. But
If you
Instagram,
reach out.
Yeah, Instagram feels like it's more active for us. Shut Up I Love It 1.
Go follow them on Instagram. Go check out Shut Up I Love It. Go check out Joe and Sasha's other things. They're both multi-hyphenates.
Yeah.
So go check out all their stuff.
Sasha's got screenwriting classes if you want to know how to stay away from Onward.
Yes.
Wayward.
Don't go wayward. Don't go onward. Take Sasha's class. And learn how to not have any act-related problems. 1, 2, 3,
None.
or otherwise.
True.
None.
You can find me at Diet J on Twitter and Instagram. And if you like the podcast, consider subscribing on Patreon. You get bonus episodes. You get access to my film library on your streaming thing. And if you were thinking about watching Onward this holiday season with your family, don't. Don't put anybody through that. It's not even worth it for the kids. It's worse than a lump of coal in your stocking. Joe, Sasha,
shit.
thanks again.
Thank you, Jay.
Adios.
This has been Blockbusting. Go see something good for a change.